Hi everybody and welcome back to The Life's Good. I'm AJ, this is my channel, and here we are in AJ's den, my new little bungalow. I set away the Evil Dog double IPA beer kit a good few days ago, and I had to put in some hops on day 4 and eventually decant it into a keg. Have a quick look at this video to see what happened on day 4. I've just pulled the bucket out from under the worktop, ready to add my hops. And I just wanted to show you the rate at which the CO2 is actually passing through that little bubble valve. If you look carefully in this area, you can see it's gradually pushing the water around and eventually bubbles up through and is allowed to escape through the top of the valve. I have explained before that this apparatus will actually stop the ingress of air, and obviously the air could bring in all sorts of nasties that can affect your fermentation and spoil your beer. The CO2 is protecting the beer and we're allowing it to force its way through that bubbler and escape. So what we need to do now, as I said, it's day 4. We're going to pop in the hops. And I've got 2 sachets to open, and I'll show you now what's in those sachets. I've just snipped the top off these 2 sachets, these packets, with a pair of scissors. And what I want to show you is inside here is what is akin to a tea bag. And inside this bag is a pelletized form of the hops. They harvest all the flowers and dry them and pelletize them. I've got that one. This is the Summit. Incidentally, you can't smell on a video, but I can actually smell the aroma from these hops as I've opened the packet. They do smell quite floral. There's a distinctive flavour to these and slightly different. So what you do now is you have to pop these into a teacup. I've got 2 cups here, put 1 in each, and I'm going to add, I've not long boiled the kettle, I'm going to add some boiling water to these and steep them in the boiling water for about 10 minutes. I'm making a right mess of this, guys. About 10 minutes. So just let them soak. You can see that they do swell up a bit. But some boiling water on those in a mug for about 10 minutes before we actually pop them into the bucket of beer. It's about 12 minutes since I sat those bags in the water, and I'm going to release the lid from my bucket. As you can see, there's a little bit of bubble on the surface, and the CO2 is still escaping. It's still working. This will carry on working for a few more days yet. And all I'm going to do is add the bag and the liquid to this. So everything in this cup now, so your bag's going in, and the tea, if you like to call it that bag has made is actually being added to this brew. Same with this one. Get the bag, drop it in there, and add that liquid to that. That's going to add all the hop flavour into that beer. There will be more emitted from the hop bags over the next few days. We're just going to leave that now to continue working, and we'll come back to this when it's finished fermenting and transfer it into the keg. Well, as you saw from that, the hops were easy enough to put in, and what I found afterwards was that the outside temperature had gone cold, the bungalow temperature had cooled down a bit, and fermentation slowed up somewhat, and I had to wait until day 9 before I was able to transfer the beer from the bucket into the keg. Take a look at this and see what I did. Well, we set this beer away on the Sunday the 30th of October. On day 4 I put the hops in, And what I've come to notice since then is that the fermentation has been really slow, and that is down to temperature. It's gotten really cold outside, and that in effect has caused it to be a bit cooler in the house. I don't have the heating on full blast. I keep it fairly ambient. So the fermentation slowed a little bit. So I'm now at day 9. This has slowed right down. There is still a couple of bubbles coming out of here. If I press this, you can see bubbles there. It's still working a little bit. That is not a problem. I do, however, now I do have to transfer the beer from this bucket into a nice, clean, sterilised keg. And I've got some brewing sugar as well to prime the keg with. And I'll take you through the little process that I go through to get all this beer safely into the keg and set away for the final part of fermentation. I've got my king keg here. It's been thoroughly washed, scrubbed, sterilised, and is now ready to receive the beer. Very well rinsed as well, I might add. Once you sterilise these things, it's always a good idea to give them a thorough rinsing with nice fresh cold water to remove any residue of the sterilising agent, which could spoil your beer and kill fermentation and all those sorts of things. So sterilised, rinsed, ready to go. And I've got 3 ounces of brewing sugar here. And I do use brewing sugar as opposed to household sugar. Household sugars can contain all sorts of bits and pieces, which it won't stop the fermentation. The yeast will still eat that sugar. But with a brewing sugar, you get a much cleaner result. Nice, fresh, clean beer. And there's no chance of anything nasty being in here to go into your beer. So I'm going to get this as best I can into the keg. So that's 3 ounces of brewing sugar to prime the keg with. There we go, that's in there. I now need to get my siphon kit together and siphon the beer from the bucket into the keg. And I'm going to set the keg down on a little chair underneath the worktop here and set up the bucket above it so I can siphon down into the keg. Now I know you can't see the keg below here, but I just wanted to show you how I'm going to set up my siphoning kit. Now I've got this little clamp arrangement. This will hold the siphon hose in place on the side of the brewing bucket whilst it's siphoning, so you don't have to fiddle around holding things in place. It leaves both your hands free. Now the way this works is that this section grips the hose, so you want that on the inside of the bucket, and the S shape clamps over the outside of the bucket, just like that. So that's clipped in place there. I've got my siphoning equipment here. Now it's basically a flexible hose. I've shown you all these things before. I'm going through it again very quickly. A flexible hose. Now this has all been sterilised inside the keg when I was sterilising the keg. I have to add that sterilising everything, cleanliness is the most important part of brewing. Beer, wine, whatever you're making, cleanliness is paramount. So all sterilised and rinsed. Siphon hose, siphon wand. I call it a wand. I don't know what the correct term is. It's a siphon wand as far as I'm concerned. It has this little section that clips in the bottom that is supposed to stop any sediment from going in and up the hose and subsequently into your keg. In addition to that, I had, with one of my beer kits, I had a little muslin sock. It's actually nylon, it's not made of muslin, but that's the sort of product that it is. It's a little bag that you can attach to or wrap around the bottom of that wand, and that stops all the bits and pieces in this bucket from being drawn through up the hose and into your keg. Since I acquired this with one of my beer kits, I've used it on every siphoning, and believe me, it saves a lot of hassle, and it stops all that crud, if you like, all that sludge in the bottom being drawn into the hose and ending up in your keg. So I'm going to attach that to the bottom of there. I'm going to attach the wand to the hose and slide the whole thing down into the bucket and clip it onto this clip, and it should stay in place. Okay, here we go. My little siphon sock, as I call it, is tied at the bottom of the wand there. That is pushed into the hose, and the other end of the hose I'm going to drop down into the keg. What I'll do, I'll set you back in a minute so that you can see the whole thing set up from a distance, so you can see the keg as well as the bucket. I'm just going to drop the end of the hose into there, and what I'm going to do is to carefully put this inside the beer, down the side of the bucket, all the way down until it reaches the bottom. Once it's done that, press the hose against that clip, and there you are. It's in place, and it will stay in place until you remove it. And the other end of the hose is inside the keg. I'll just lift you back so you can see the complete setup. Right, there you go. I'll just point it out. There's the bucket of beer. The hose and the siphon wand are all attached there, and I've let the hose dangle down inside the keg, and all I need to do now is to suck on the end of the hose and draw the beer up over that hump there, and as it flows down here it will draw the rest of the beer up behind it, and that will keep flowing until the bucket is empty. Well, it's at this point that you may get a sneaky first taste of your beer, because you have to suck on the end of the hose to pull that beer through and allow it to start siphoning into the keg. So I'm going to do that now. I have to admit, that first taste actually is quite nice. It does have a slight sort of hoppy, citrusy flavour, very smooth, slightly bitter. I think this is going to be a nice pint of beer when it's finished. So we now allow this to siphon all of this into this keg. I'm actually holding you freehand at the moment, so it's going to be a little bit wobbly, but what's happened now is I've finished siphoning the beer. All of the beer has come all the way down the hose and has filled the keg. You can see that it's filled up to about that level there. So there's a good 40 pints in that keg. And if we go back over the top, what I wanted to show you was what's left inside the bucket. You can see in the bottom there's all that sediment, plus the two bags that contain the hop pellets sitting there, and you can see where the siphon wand and its little sock on the bottom were positioned right into the bottom of the bucket. And what I do, and what I did in fact with this, is that as it gets to the last couple of inches of beer in the bottom of the bucket, I actually tip it forward so that it continues to siphon the last of the liquid off of the sediment in the bottom of this this bucket. So just by tipping it forward very carefully, you allow the hose and the siphoning to remove every drop of that precious beer from the bucket. So exciting now, because we now have 40 pints of beer in a keg. Now what we need to do is put the lid on the keg, and this has got an attachment on it. It's actually a safety valve, so any increase of pressure in there will be emitted through the valve. It's also a point where you can add CO2 at a later point if you need to, in order to get the beer out if there's not enough pressure in the keg. However, I prefer kegs with the 4-inch wide neck. You can get them with smaller necks. This one's got a 4-inch wide neck. The reason I prefer that is because you can get your hand inside and clean that keg properly with a scrubbing brush, sponge, whatever, and do maintenance on the tap. You can't do that if that neck is much smaller. You can get 2-inch ones, but you can't get your hand in, you can't maintain it properly. So 4-inch wide neck, that's the lid. Now before I put the lid on, what I do is I use a little bit of petroleum jelly, Vaseline, you know the product. So a little bit of that on your finger, and I smear it on the thread of the lid before I put it on top of the keg. It helps to seal, and it also helps for an easy removal later on when you need to take it back off. So a little bit of Vaseline on that thread, and you put it on by hand. It just screws on the top, but you want to make sure it's nice and tight without ripping the thread, of course, although it's quite chunky, this thread on this lid. But I have got this special spanner. You can get these from your brewing outlets. You might better get them on some sort of shopping site. There's several sites you can go on for buying things. Have a look around. What have you got? You got Amazon, eBay, places like that. Have a look, see if you can get the keg spanner, because that saves you a lot of hassle, particularly removing the lid. Because I find after I've got when I've got an empty barrel, taking the lid off is a right pain. It's seized on and it will not budge. This helps remove it. It also helps put it on, and it sits on there and locates on the little sort of wings that you've got sticking out of this lid. It sits on there, and you can just give it a little tweak. I put my thumbs on the handles and just give that a little tweak around and make that a nice tight fit. And that's ready to put away in storage. And secondary fermentation will take, I don't know, 10 days, a week to 10 days, maybe a bit longer. But you want to sit this somewhere. Mine ideally is going to go in my little pub in the corner, in the kitchen, on a worktop, somewhere safe. Or if you want to keep it out of the way, in a nice cupboard, out the way for a couple of weeks before you bring it out and start to use it. Drink it. Use it? You don't use beer, do you? So that's it. The beer's in the keg. So I can set this to one side now, and it will now continue fermenting. However, on this occasion, it's producing CO2. The yeast that's still in that beer will carry on eating that extra sugar we've put in, the 3 ounces of priming sugar. It will continue working now, but the CO2 can't escape. What happens is it's forced into the liquid. And when you pour your beer, you'll notice straight away it goes frothy. The CO2 is trying to escape. You pour a beer into a glass and it goes all frothy and it all bubbles up and you get a head on the top. That is the CO2 rushing to escape. Whilst it's fermenting in the keg, the CO2 is forced into the beer. It also creates pressure in the barrel. So when you open that tap, the pressure in the barrel pushes the beer out of the tap and into your glass. And when I mentioned this valve on the top that you can add a CO2 induction to, what happens in here is if you run out of CO2 pressure, you don't want to allow air to bubble back up inside. So before that happens, you can add a bit more CO2 to the top. I've got a little valve arrangement I can put on here. We will cover that in a later video. No need to cover it today. From today onwards, we just put this to one side and we have to be very patient and wait about 10 days-ish, a week to 2 weeks, and this should or will be ready for decanting and drinking. Well, I do hope that was fairly explanatory for you all. A friend of mine through work, Dan, bless him, he's been watching my videos and has been quite taken by them. And he approached me the other day and he said, I've got something for you. And I was intrigued as to what it might be. And later that day, he presented me with this. It's the Bad Cat beer kit. It's from the same stable as the Evil Dog, the Bulldog Brewing Company make these. The Bad Cat Imperial Red Craft Beer Kit. My goodness me. And it's another heavyweight, this one, 7.5%. That's a bit strong. It's similar, I see, in terms of the kit contents. It's got a couple of sachets of hops, a sachet of yeast, and the big bag of malt. I've never made this before. I will be giving it a go, and I will take you guys through the process. I might simplify it somewhat. I do find these videos are a little bit long-winded. When you're trying to explain to somebody how to do something, it feels long-winded. It takes a long time. It's like making a cup of tea. We all make a cup of tea. It takes us minutes. But you make a video on how to make a cup of tea and see how long that video lasts. There's a challenge for you. So, home brewing, home beer kits, the Bad Cat to follow up the Evil Dog. My goodness me. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's video, guys. I'm going to crack on. My favourite football team is playing this evening. I've got a few minutes left before they kick off, so I'm going to settle down with a beer, something to eat, and watch the game. So whatever you're doing, you look after each other. Take care, stay safe, come back and see us soon. Oh, and don't forget all those things you have to do. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, all those things that you do on YouTube. I'd appreciate it. So thanks for watching, thanks for your time. See you next time in The Life's Good. Bye-bye now. Bad Cat.